Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. The title is How to Build a Good Open Source Portfolio. As flashy as it sounds, this video is going to be a little bit of a reality check as to does an open source portfolio really matter? Is that really something you should be running behind? Or is there something else that led me to sort of have this sort of a GitHub contribution graph? Do I think it even matters? And what you should do to try to reach this point maybe in your open source contribution journey or generally in your development journey, and does it really matter, and is this something you should be chasing or something else? Let's get right into the video. So the first question that I need to answer here is, do contributions really matter? Does this green on your graph really matter? And the short answer is no. It doesn't matter for a few reasons. I think the biggest reason people want to get a lot of green on their graph is to get hired. Okay, this is a good metric to show people it's my open source resume or it's my developmental resume. The problem is this green isn't really something people look at. If I'm hiring someone and they send me their GitHub, I'm not looking at how. I mean, I guess it matters a little bit. Okay, this guy is really active, but it's like a 1 second, extremely vain metric. What's more important is what contributions they've made. So as soon as I look at their GitHub, I look at the contributions, I start clicking around to see where they've contributed. Is it a big organization? In that big organization, is that the code that they've contributed? Is it substantial? Was it a pain point for the company? Was it a big code change? How much help they asked for while solving it? Rather than how many sort of issues they've solved on a day-to-day basis. Unless you're an open source maintainer of a very big project, unless it's very clearly visible on your GitHub, these green don't really matter. And the only way you'll immediately, without an interview, get hired into a company is if you have a very solid open source project that you completely maintain end to end. Other than that, you will have to go through an interview, and during the interview, you'll have to solve for that company. Let's move to the second point. When you're solving for that company, or generally when you're contributing, try to contribute in depth. Quantity does not matter, quality does matter. The goal of an open source contribution should be you take away the pain point of a CTO, of a developer of that company. If it's a simple issue that you're solving, they can solve it themselves. They would be happy that you've solved it and save them 5 minutes, but they'll be really happy if you solve an issue that is unsolved for a few months, and like developers don't have the time to look at it. And it's a big issue. It would take a normal developer in the team 20 hours to do, or like it's half of someone's week. If you can solve that problem, that's when it becomes substantial. That's when you get into the eyes of the maintainers. Because other than that, solving small issues is great, and also a great thing to do if you're a beginner for your own sort of motivation and dopamine hits. But as the person who's hiring, the person on the other side of the table doesn't really care about how many issues you've solved. You just need to solve one good big issue, which would mean one single contribution on your GitHub graph. That might be just enough to make you contribute. I've not built these metrics out of thin air. These are things I see on a day-to-day basis. And I get the desperation as a beginner to contribute as quickly as possible and fix a bunch of issues. But the first thing you should do is just understand the project in depth. Trust me, I'm going through the same process as a beginner in AI. I have another GitHub, and in that GitHub, I'm purely making AI contributions and learning AI. I have a mentor, a friend who sort of is teaching me, who's done a PhD in AI, or not AI, machine learning, whatever. And used to work at Meta, now works on his own thing. That guy, I spend time with every week, and I've started this 0 to 1 journey to learn. Again, I'm doing it very passively, like an hour a week or something like that. You actually have many more hours than me. And I am also taking that 0 to 1 journey again. And I am trying to teach these things to me again and again. I get the desperation to solve a small typo. I don't anymore. That's probably the worst thing you can do, because it will give you false sense of satisfaction. Okay, oh, you know something, even though you don't. That issue would have taken a developer in that company like 1 second to fix. So you haven't really made their life easy, but you might feel in the back of your head, you're good. It's good for dopamine hits, but if there's a project you want to get hired for, don't make small contributions there. Make a substantial contribution. Initially, spend a lot of time just getting into the depths of the project. If you want to learn more about how you do that, I made a video before this where I basically broke down my learning framework. I feel any technology can be learned in around 3, 4, 5 months if you, one, are consistent, two, have the right person guiding you, more specifically and hopefully a person who's currently working in the industry. I'd like to give an example here. I have a friend, a female friend in Delhi, and she has been trying to learn to code. She paid someone like 1 lakh rupees. There are like a lot of brick and mortar businesses like this in Delhi that teach you how to code, web development, the MERN stack, same thing I'm teaching in my course. But the things that she's learning, the kind of doubts that she's asking, I worry that by the end of it, she won't be able to build a real world project. What I mean by that is she's spending a lot of time on CSS, HTML, and like trying to understand it in extreme depth. When these are things which are not really used in the industry, she should go into depth, but maybe into Express, maybe into an HTTP server, maybe into the basics of JavaScript. I think even learning JavaScript in depth is probably better than learning CSS in depth. So it's very necessary for you to know what to pick and choose and learn when you're learning. And for that, if you have a mentor, if you have someone who's currently working in the industry, then it helps you pick and choose what to learn. So be very cautious around not going into the depths of things that are not really used on a day-to-day basis. It's good for you to clear fundamentals, but at the same time, don't spend it too much. If you want to complete this journey in 3-4 months, like every technology is an endless learning. You won't ever stop learning. There's always a new framework out there. It's good to know what engineers in a company are spending their time on a day-to-day basis. If someone is working in a company for 40 hours, are they spending 20 hours changing HTML or CSS code? Probably not. They're probably spending most of their time changing TypeScript code in a full stack project. So maybe it makes sense to dive deeper into TypeScript. I think it's a very easy out to learn a small easy thing in depth. Yeah, bro, I'm just going end to end this small easy thing. It's an easy out. I understand CSS 100%, but again, you don't use CSS. And then that creates a lot of fatigue. You spend 3 months learning CSS. By the time the JavaScript, the TypeScript, the right things start, you're like, yeah, I either don't want to do this, or maybe I'm doing something wrong, or why is my learning so slow? And the answer is you're learning the wrong thing. So please focus on learning, and they're also focus on learning the right thing. If you can get a mentor, get someone who's working in the industry who can guide you, can do this, do that. They don't have to teach you 24/7. Even if they give you 30 minutes, that's what I get from my person who's teaching me. And that's good enough for me. He just tells me, bro, ye karna, ye nahi karna, do this, don't do that. That's good enough. That's a great start and probably a nice way to learn. Why am I teaching how to learn in a video where I talk about open source contributions and building your open source portfolio? The answer is, and a good open source portfolio or like a very green graph on GitHub is an outcome. Don't chase that outcome. Chase understanding what people are doing in a company on a day-to-day basis. Everything else will be a secondary outcome. You shouldn't be focused on getting as green as possible, as many contributions in as possible. You should be focusing on getting into the depths of a project more practically. If you know there's an open source project that hires, or generally you're interested in React, for example, go into the depths of that open source project and then maybe start contributing. Because trust me, if there is an open source project, usually you will see only 2, 3, 4 people are maintaining it. There are not a lot of people. You just have to be the 5th person there. For that, you will have to be very consistent, be very deep in understanding that open source project. Cool. Finally, some final thoughts and conclusions. Don't run behind the green in your graph. It'll come. I am myself starting a 0 to 1 journey in a fresh GitHub. And I think in 6 months or so, I'm happy to post it on the channel. And you can see an extremely sporadic GitHub, not a lot of contributions. And I'm sure eventually at some point in a year, 2 years, 5 years, if like that's the field I end up going in, if I become an AI engineer or whatever, most probably that won't happen. If it does, then you'll see frequent contributions, because that's what I like to do on a day-to-day basis. I have 1 project, 2 projects, 10 projects that I contribute to. I understand very well and I'm working to build them. So, but my motivation is not to get green on my graph. So please don't keep that as motivation. Won't help you in the long term. Keep learning as a motivation and go very deep in open source projects. That is what will help you get that green open source graph. This green open source graph that you see comes after 10 years. I joined GitHub on 2014, and when I was learning, my graph looked something like quite a suspenseful video here. My internet is not cooperating. All right, there you go. The first year was literally just 1 contribution, and then the second year maybe a few. Pretty sporadic. The transition from here to here was very natural and never something I chased. It just happened very organically. I'm hoping it happens for you as well. And it will if you have a very learning framework versus a very chasing outcomes, like fancy outcomes like this framework. Cool. With that, let's end the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.